Welcome to the Art of Conscious Living TV. I'm so very pleased today to have as my guest Maria Danley. She's a certified medical intuitive. We have so much to talk about body, mind, and spirit, and all of the great work that she's offering to many clients for healing on the emotional level, on the physical, and the spiritual level. She is now living in Marin County in Mill Valley, and I'm so very pleased to have her here at the studio today to talk about all of what she's offering to others in the way of relieving their suffering and revealing the truer higher self of who we are. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for taking your time, and welcome to the Art of Conscious Living TV.
Well, thank you, Victoria. It's nice to be here with you.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day outside. It's Saturday, and up on the mountain where I live in Mill Valley, it's just gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. So I'm fine.
Well, let's start at the very beginning. You are Princeton grad. You were one of the first women that were allowed to go to Princeton back in the early 70s.
Yes, we were. I was in the first group of women. There were only, I think, somewhere between 60 and 80 of us on campus and 4,000 men. So it was an experience. And in those days, men would wear jackets and ties to class, and Princeton is a very beautiful campus. I felt so privileged to go, and I loved it.
What did they ask the women to wear? So that they weren't being distracted by the women. Did they have a protocol about that?
No. It just the history of Princeton. A lot of the men wore jackets and ties to school.
And the women wore?
But they never had women before us, so we weren't told to wear anything. Well, we wore beautiful clothing, I guess, but that was it. It was just lovely to be there. And I started the first singing group, the first female singing group there, and the first mixed singing group. That's what I did. The female singing group was called the Princeton Tiger Lilies, and the mixed singing group was called the Princeton Cats and Jammers, and they're still going strong today.
And what were you majoring in? What did you study?
Yes, I studied literature, American literature, and art history. I did a double major and wrote my thesis on Henry David Thoreau. So that's when you graduate from Princeton, you have to write a thesis. And so mine was, I read Thoreau's journal, his diary that was about 16 volumes, and wrote on that for my thesis.
Mm. And so you were from Chicago area, and you found your way to California.
Yes.
Some years ago. And in the way of California, it's a total different take on Princeton and the East Coast. Where here it's more of healing and alternative, and so henceforth you found your way into being a certified medical intuitive. What training and what is it all about to be a medical intuitive?
Well, I actually got my training here in Sausalito, for anybody who is interested, at the Academy of Intuition Medicine. But my background was I had been interested in meditation and let's say healing, metaphysics for a number of years. And I started meditating when I was 16, when I was in high school. And shortly after Princeton, I went into transcendental meditation. I was a very strong Christian as a child, all on my own, not my family by any means. So I was always searching for some level of connection to God. And after my couple of years after Princeton, then I started going more deeply into my deeper learning of metaphysics. And I went in earnest. I was studying metaphysics through Lazarus, and that is through a company called Concept Synergy, and meditating quite regularly. So the meditation was a big piece of it, studying metaphysics. And then I became a trainer for the Coaches Training Institute, and I taught coaches for about 10 years through the Coaches Training Institute. And it was about 2005, I think, I went through the Academy of Intuition Medicine, and I got my master's certificate. So yes, I'm a California certified medical intuitive, and it basically means that I can look inside an energy field, I can read what is going on, and usually get right to the root of whatever the issue is, physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually.
Well, it's said that we are all intuitive, so I guess they are training you to tap into something that we naturally, inherently all possess. Yes. So what is that training like to go through it? And what exercises would they, an example of exercises to tap into that, what would that be?
Well, the beautiful founder of the school is Dr. Francesca McCartney. She's brilliant. I think she's one of the first PhDs in energy medicine in maybe the world. And It really entailed going one night a week in the beginning, where we would go to the building over in Sausalito, and then in the beginning we were just working on ourselves, which is always the root of metaphysics, is to be working on yourself. We would learn to ground our energy. We would learn how to pull energy cords out of our chakras. We'd learn how to, in a sense, separate our energy from other people. And I can give you a very interesting story about that. Right in the beginning, when I was studying, and I was always a good student, we were working on how to clear and pull cords out of chakras. And we had a homework assignment that we had to every day practice pulling out these cords. If we just make it up, just pull stuff out, pull stuff out.
When you say cords, what cords? What are cords?
The idea is that the way it looks energetically, it's sort of like looking behind a veil. We all look at we're physical, here's the chair, everything is solid here. But when you look energetically at something, you can see all kinds of filaments of light that are connecting us to each other. We're all connected. And so when I'm looking as an intuitive, I can look and I can see which chakras, which areas of the body are clogged with other people cording in. I can see where they're cording in the back, or I can see that. So what I'm doing, this is a piece of what the work is I'm actually, some of it is I'm pulling some of those cordings out, or actually helping to shift contracts that we make as children when we all grow up in families with a lot of dysfunction. It's just human. But those things get corded and they get stuck in the body, the physical and the emotional, the mental body, and you can actually clear that stuff. And it's fascinating how we learn to do that. But I learned a very visceral example of that when I was doing my homework. I woke up one morning, this was shortly after I started my degree, and I had a terrible cold. And I knew, okay, that's it, I'm down for the count, I'm going to have this awful cold. Came downstairs and I did my homework anyway. I started pulling these cords out, and I got to my throat and I kept pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling these cords out, and all of a sudden they felt more like snakes, and I could feel this pulling of like a snake. I pulled it out and I had an image of when I was a child, and I was having my mouth washed out in the sink by this woman who was telling me every time you speak, she'd say, snakes come out of your mouth. It was pretty abusive. But I pulled this last snake out. It must have been about 50 of these cords. And all of a sudden, my head was clear, the cold was gone, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt, Victoria, that illness is energetic. And it was from there that I decided, wow, this is fascinating, I want to know more.
So at that moment in time of this woman, that she did to you as a child, she was imputing on you this energy that had been stagnant and stuck with you, and it stayed there.
Well, she'd been saying it quite a lot through my
Yes.
childhood. You know, every time you speak, snakes come out of your mouth and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know this, and this was now just 10 years ago when that stuff was still all caught here, and I pulled it out. But the cold, I've never had a cold that was a full-blown cold, just go like that.
So I'm getting a sense that it's about tuning your mind and shutting your mind down of your ordinary thoughts, and allowing the, as you say, the intuitive to well up and speak to you. Mm-hmm.
You know, I think a way to put it is that what we were doing at the school, she was showing us how to run energy into these different systems that are inside of us. It's pretty fascinating stuff. And we were always clearing other things within us that had been built up from the past. And so part of the work as a medical intuitive is we're going in to help reprogram whatever was dysfunction was from childhood. But we're also helping, let's say, and we've talked about this before, Victoria, that so much illness is a result of people repressing their emotions, and we stuff it in the hip and the knees. And so a lot of what I'm seeing and bringing up is the emotion that is trapped in that hip or stuck over here. And yes, you have images and memories from the past, absolutely, or concurrent lifetimes or other lifetimes, yeah.
And you have spirit guides who are intuitively you're able to tap in and invite them to come and you hear the whispers of them guiding you and giving you information.
Yes. Well, that I got in touch with back in the 80s. I was a writer, I was a composer for Jim Henson for 5 years. I was writing music for his Mother Goose stories and living in England. And one of the producers came to my cottage, and she came for tea, and she said, you know, Maria, you get so much information from your spirit guides. would you ask your spirit guides to talk to my spirit guides so that I can get information about my husband and my son? And I said, well, I'll try. And that was the first time. That was back around 1987. And I closed my eyes and asked her spirit guides, my spirit guides, to talk to her spirit guides. And as I listened, all of this, and this is way before going for the medical intuitive degree. This was back in the 80s. But I heard all this information about her and her son and her husband. And I said, oh, this is why your teenage son is, why he's so upset with you and what you're doing. And this is what he wants you to change. And all this information came. And when I came out of meditation, and her jaw was a bit dropped, how did you do that? And I said, I don't know. You just asked me to ask my spirit guides to talk to your spirit guides, and that's what they said. Well, I found out years later that it's called relay channeling. It means I can see deceased, I can see spirit guides. I primarily, though, talk to the higher self when I want information. And so that's how that all started years ago. It's called relay channeling. So I call myself actually a higher self channel. And on my radio show, that's what I do. When people call in, I let them, they'll call in, ask a question, and I just relay information from their higher selves.
You mentioned the Lazarus, and for those who don't know about Lazarus, why in particular are you tapping into Lazarus, and why does his work and his energy speak to you?
Well, thank you for that question. I was looking, as many of us were, many of us on our spiritual paths back in the 60s and 70s. I was looking for something that was more real. I started with a Course of Miracles just out of Princeton. I did that course, and I taught it in England a few years later. But I then went into rebirthing and some of these other different, let's say, there were different seminars they were doing at the time. I didn't do EST, but I did something.
EST?
I think it was called EST.
Yeah, EST, and then it became the Forum, and now it's called the what is it called today? There's a new word for it.
I know the Forum. I did some of the Forum.
Yeah, it's made different transitions, so it's gone through 3 different transitions.
So this, after rebirthing, and I was kind of floundering because I could see it as a rebirther. I went right into doing that, teaching rebirthing, and I could see it only went so far, and it was just working with affirmations. And I said, this is not going very deep. Well, I heard a recording of Lazarus talking about power and responsibility. And I was so moved, I went, oh my gosh, this is real.
Who is Lazarus?
Lazarus is a channeled entity. There's a man named Jack Purcell. The company is called Concept Synergy. And Lazarus is the channeled being that comes through Jack Purcell. But for many of us...
So it's like a mediumship.
Well, I don't know if medium. I'd rather call it a channel. Okay. There are many... I'm certain people watching your show know about channeled entities. But Lazarus has been one that just felt so real. There was didn't seem to be any ego in it. And so I just look at it as a fantastic source of learning about metaphysics, because the more I kept clearing, taking on personally, changing my own anger, my own shame, my own issues, when I started cleaning them all up, Victoria, that's how I became so psychic. I never ever expected to be a healer, or I never expected to be so psychic. It's just that as soon as I'd apply the metaphysics and clean something up in my mirror, or this shadowy world that I'm in, and I'd clean up this little window and clean up that window, bang, all of a sudden I could see it in other people. And it was a byproduct of doing deep spiritual work.
So when you say psychic, most people know ESP, and they say it's extrasensitory perception. Mm-hmm. And I know it differently. I know it as, I say, effective sensitory perception. Mm. I think that we all possess it, all humans.
Do. Absolutely.
And I think that we are too much in our busy everyday mind, and we lose touch with that natural innate ability that's within all of us.
Absolutely. Well, yes.
So when we quiet down the mind, that effectiveness of that extra perception is there. It's kind of like the animal instinctness of knowingness, and it's there.
Well, we noticed when we were at the school, because when I went to the Academy of Intuition Medicine and the others that were attracted to go to that school, Francesca would address us as sensitive, you sensitive people, and she would, because every one of us had gifts. Everybody has gifts. But what I didn't know is you can really develop them. So I would never have known that I'd be clairaudient, clairsentient, clairvoyant, but they can be developed, and people can learn. It's just drawing out what is innate in all of us, and then learning to trust it, learning to trust that intuition.
Does the energy get stronger as the more you use it over time, or is it just totally there and strong from the very beginning, or over time it gets more clear?
When I'm talking, because what I like to do is I like to talk to the higher self. So the way it works for me is I'll open a sacred space. I'll call in the different elements, and I'll call in the higher selves and souls and unseen friends of the person I'm reading for. And then I'll go into a meditative state. And the way it happens for me is it's like screens will drop down, and they'll either be visual, where I can see, oh, I'm looking at a girl 8 years old and she's crying in the living room floor or whatever. It might be a very specific image. It might be I'm hearing words. They're saying, oh, they're talking about this tape loop that's going on for you, or this is aspect of your life. And so I'm seeing these screens, hearing information, and sometimes when I'm actually see deceased people, which will happen, sometimes they'll pop in so clearly. I was reading for a woman in Florida. I happened to be working with a group of women who had all lost their husbands, and so she had asked, could I talk to her husband? And I called him in, and I don't remember, his name was Lee, and he wasn't there, and we were working on healing her, working with her daughter and that kind of thing. All of a sudden, bam, I saw this guy come in. He had bushy black eyebrows and round glasses and barrel-chested, tall guy. And I said, oh my gosh, there's a man here. And I described him, and she said, yeah, that's Lee. And so I started to talk to him, and she cried. She had a fascinating story, what happened to her, where they had both just moved down to Naples, Florida. And this was the first week after he had retired. And they set up their apartment, and they went out shopping. And they purchased a lamp and a chair that she thought was so unattractive. She didn't like it. She said, "Oh, Lee, I don't want those in the house." And, "Oh, I want them in my little study." She said, "Okay." So he put the lamp and the chair in her study. Now, 1 week after they were there, Lee got up in the middle of the night and he had a heart attack and he died. And she was grief-stricken, and she said for a full year, when her grief would get really big for her and she'd be wailing or crying, I should say, the light would turn on in the room, and it would stay on, his lamp that he wanted in his study, and then it would slowly fade off. And she knew Lee was with her. So when she came to me, she said, could I talk to Lee? And he came in, and the first thing he said to me was, tell her I am really, really sorry that I left so soon, and that I didn't mean to leave you with the house or the apartment. And then I asked him another question. I said, well, Lee, I can see you. Is there anything else that you want me to say to your wife? And he got real quiet, and he just stood there stiffly. And I was thinking, oh boy, maybe I'm not a very good intuitive. And he's just standing there. And then all of a sudden another sense came up and said, he is feeling like I'm invading in their privacy. And he got very, very quiet. And so I told her, I said, he's being quiet now because he thinks that it's too personal. And then she started to really cry. She said, that's exactly what Lee would say. So after that, I did have a reputation in Florida for being, for all the widows to come and talk to me. So
you were picking up his personality. And
oh,
not only,
I was seeing him. Oh, yeah.
So when you say you see him, I mean, it's not like you're seeing me right now. He's in ether form, or he's
well, it's not with my eyes open. My eyes are closed, so it would be like a vivid image in my brain.
So he's appearing to you in your mind's eye.
That's
of your
right.
Perception and energy.
Yeah.
And then through that you're communicating.
Yeah. But
are you in an altered state at that time, or are you in a state that you're in at this moment?
Well, we all have many aspects of conscious, subconscious, and unconscious mind going on all the time. Mm-hmm. But the way you and I are talking right now, we're in, I think, I forget my states, is it beta state? Whatever is the conscious mind state, you and I are in that right now.
And the alpha state is the higher state.
But I think theta and delta is where I'm dropping down to. So I am slowing the mind down. I'm in a place where frequencies are slightly different. But it is a quieter, slower mind. But my real fascination is to be able to talk to the higher self of somebody, because we all have a higher conscious mind, and it has only our best interest, and it wants to love us and wants us to be loved. And so for me to be able to not only channel the higher self for other people, but to connect people to their higher self so that they can communicate with their own higher selves, Victoria, that's what really turns me on, yeah.
So when we speak to psychiatry today, and they say that you're hearing things or seeing that, they try to medicate you and perhaps deem you as being insane. And I know that I've talked to some psychiatrists, and I've mentioned to them that I'm very intuitive and I'm very knowing and I trust that. And then they start probing and saying, well, are you hearing voices? And they start going there where medical practice will go. And they don't know anything about it. They don't want to acknowledge it, actually. So what do you say forth to that, of how we can borrow and respect each other and learn from each other of the commercial, conventional way of medical and the alternative way of honoring the unknown, the parapsychology?
Mm-hmm. I think that times are changing, and changing so rapidly, Victoria. I think that the doctors that are talking that way, and ooh, you're hearing voices, the more actual hip version of that is saying, you aren't? Meaning, we all are hearing different voices. And one of the first things I'm doing with my coaching clients, for example, the ones that want to really work through the dysfunction that they were programmed in their brain from childhood 0 to 7, we were all programmed, picking up all of our parents' and thoughts and feelings. So we have their voices in our heads, we have others, our friends' voices in our heads, but we also still, we're multidimensional beings, and we're in this time space, but all of it is going on simultaneously, and we know that through Einstein, right? So it makes it kind of complex, because you have a child in there that's still alive and an adolescent who has a voice. You have a negative voice, we call it in coaching saboteur or gremlin, and I call it negative ego.
And that lives in the subconscious?
They're not really, I don't know where you'd say, I wouldn't say it lives there, because we're such in whole. They don't live in a certain type. The subconscious stores information, the unconscious connects all of us.
Okay, subconscious is like the data processor, holder. Okay.
But you can have a conversation with your subconscious just like any aspect. But that's another topic. Let's put it this way. We have different motivations, and I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm sitting here with you, and all of a sudden my mind starts to wander, and my child goes, I'm scared, I don't know if I want to be on TV. Or my adolescent says, when is this going to be over? I'm bored, I want to get out and play. Or that negative voice, uh-oh, what are people going to think about you on television? But my higher self might be just saying, you're doing just fine. This is lovely. What a gift to be here with Victoria. And anybody watching right now, what a gift. All those voices are going on at the same time. I just happen to be more aware. I'm not saying those are the voices going on. I don't have no desire to leave, and my child isn't scared. But sorting those voices out, you see, getting more and more conscious when we can know, oh, I've got a child or an adolescent that just wants to get a boyfriend. Even in our 60s or whatever, she might still be looking for some young, hot guy. But as we mature and these voices become healed and the child feels safe because I'm holding her and loving her, my inner child, and these other parts are coming home to me, I'm growing my spiritual adult and hopefully making it more comfortable for others to be around me. But I'm more comfortable with myself, so that's how I think that is. What would I say to some of those doctors? I'd say, yeah, I do hear a lot of voices and I have them sorted out and all is well.
Wonderful. So this is all coming, you mentioned the inner child, and we hear a lot of talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's explore that. What is that all about? The child that is wounded, the child that has not been healed, now grows up to be an adult, and now they're carrying all of this pain, this emotional pain.
Yeah.
So therefore they have what I would say is a lesser emotional intelligence going on, where they are with faulty information due to this wounded child. And they could excel much more in emotional intelligence if they connected more with the healing of this child. The settling, the clearing of it. So,
I think of it slightly differently, that we all grow up with this notion that life is linear, and that when you're young, you have a childhood, then you have an adolescence, and then you snap out of it, and now you're an adult. It's not that way at all.
No, that doesn't happen like that.
The child, we have parts of ourselves that get caught in pain, especially when we're told, don't feel your feelings, or don't you talk back, or whatever it might be. This child, if it's for some, can be caught in loneliness. They didn't have a parent that was there to care for them. Most children want more love than they're getting, but we can have these places we're trapped, and I hold them as little bubbles, like this piece is sort of frozen, and this adolescent isn't getting what she wants, either by being adaptive, always being perfect, I'll just do what mommy and daddy say, or forget that, I'm going to be wild and break all the rules. Our adolescent is still wanting that attention, but they can be caught in these places, these little bubbles of pain, and until, well, I'll put it this way, when you aren't growing spiritually, or you're growing in your own personal growth. To me, personal growth work is about getting more conscious, knowing oneself, and bringing more love to oneself. So if those places are not healed, I'll be out there looking around for some guy to, I don't know, meet my adolescence fantasies, or I'm looking for some man or woman to be the mother that I never had. And we don't know we have these motivations, but they're there. If these parts of us do not, in a sense, let's put it this way, bottom line, no one is going to rescue those parts of me. I am. And that's my job as a spiritual adult, is to go find the parts of me that are hurting, love them, bring them home to me. So I am not dumping any garbage on my friends, on my family, on anybody else. I'm being spiritually mature so that, I just put it that way, so I have a lot more freedom too.
So I think that's a key factor right there, that a lot of your work must be to help people, to guide them to have the resolve with their childhood, and to clear up all of the wounds, and to take full key responsibility of their lives.
It can seem like it's a job, but the truth is, in all of it, there are treasures or gifts in every time you go in and you find a little wound here or a little piece there. There's a poignancy that you start to feel, not only love for that child or adolescent or young adult, whatever part it might be, but a sense of when they start coming home to you and you feel their peace, you start expanding into the deeper love and peace within yourself that can stay. It doesn't mean it doesn't go up and down on bad days, but there's a place where you're always getting more gifts and more treasures, learning your strengths, knowing your talents, and also knowing the places where you can get snookered and where people can take advantage of you, or where you can lose your way, or you want to know those things, because we all want discernment as adults, and many of us don't have that. And so some of this inner work is excellent for that too.
Yeah, and I think the inner work and the premises would be that you're not coming from a judging way, and it's not trying to find out what is wrong with you. It's finding, as you say, what is right, and exploring that and seeing it as a gift. And when you look at it that way, you're on the fast track of healing. You're on the fast track of living a life of celebration.
Well, look how beautiful you are, and I only know you from a very short period of time, but I know that the beauty in you, the way you keep searching, the way you keep telling yourself the truth and finding it, and going for long periods of time without telling yourself the truth. But when you do find that truth, and you can then change your life because of it, there's sometimes you can feel, I wish I'd found this truth even sooner, but this is my path, I'll accept it now. And so there's a beauty in always telling the truth. I work with the knights and ladies of the Round Table. Lazarus taught us a version of the Merlin Arthur legend that is so staggeringly beautiful, of Merlin teaching Arthur these 12 qualities of character building, 12 qualities of chivalry. And I actually have all of the 12 knights painted on my floor: the knight of courage and loyalty, virtue, the knight of authority, the knight of nobility and service, humility, grace. They go on, but each of these qualities can be built. We can grow the spiritual adult with these beautiful qualities of character. And as we're moving into this new world, a new paradigm, we need visionary leaders that are strong with character. So that's the piece that I'm doing when I'm not just doing the spiritual work that way, is helping to grow leaders so that they can have more character, because that can be learned as well.
What is this new world that we're moving into,
The new
information
paradigm?
age, this new paradigm?
Yeah.
How do you see it?
It staggers me because years ago when I thought I would get clearer the older I got, it's almost as if the less I see about it, but I do know some things about it. I know that we're moving into a world where each one of us is personally and ultimately responsible for the world that we're creating, and we're conscious of it. I think we're moving into a world that's based on greater responsibility and self-care, self-love, that is based on community or co-creating, instead of a sense of always more like in the limbic brain where it's kind of dog eat dog and fight or flight sort of a way that we've all learned. The old paradigm we're leaving is one of domination and control based on a brain that is more dependent on the limbic and the, let's say, the emotions and the more the reptilian brain, where we're moving more into an expanded consciousness. But I'm not saying it very well. I see that the future, even though, here's a better way to answer that. I think right now, Victoria, we're in the birth canal. We've left the old world. We're in the process of being born, just like a mother giving birth. And we're all in this birth canal, and it's tight, and it's bloody, and it's painful, blood and guts. It's awful when you give birth. But on the other side is going to be a world with more freedom of choice, more personal responsibility, and I believe a whole lot more. Well, actually, I can't even describe it. I think it's going to be a world that we don't know, but I think it's going to be very positive and exciting. It's going to take many, many decades, if not centuries. But those of us right now, I call them legendary leaders, are the people who are doing that because they're doing their inner work. And if I change that piece of me, it's going to change the world. Each one of us is responsible.
I see it as being more time for leisure and more time for creativity, and not so much of the dogma and not so much of this 40-hour-a-week work thing.
Absolutely.
Where we have technology taking a hold and doing things for us. And we'll be able to still make a living, but still have time to be, as you say, connected more to ourselves deeply and greater awareness. And therefore, it'll be much, much more of a beautiful planet from mankind to each other. And it'll be a place of great harmony, more so than it is right now. As you say, we're in this birth canal, so we're birthing this new ideas, and as you say, it is very painful, and it's painful of what we're experiencing on the planet right now.
But I love your saying that, and I think that's an excellent way to put it. Is the future paradigm, I think, is less about doing. Doesn't mean we're not going to be doing the things that we need to do, but that struggling, that doing, pushing ourselves to strive to succeed. It will be less about that and much more about being and receiving that future that's coming.
Yeah, so the song is John Lennon, Imagine a World. It's a beautiful song, and it says everything, where there's no heaven above and no hell below, and no countries and no religion. It's just mankind to mankind.
What will you want to do with your creativity in the future? If you had all that space and it were the future now, what would you want to do?
Well, that's a very good question. I would create beauty. I think beauty is everything. I think beauty in beauty from within, beauty around, and beauty is nature, and nature is beauty. And in beauty, everything is perfection. There's, I can't contemplate the idea of anything ugly, and ugly is of violence or insensitivity or unkindness or crudeness or insensitivity to other people. That to me is not beauty.
Yeah.
Beauty is embracing each other and being kind to each other and being loving to each other and being concerned about each other. This is beauty.
Yeah.
And I would like to, as I do, explore more of that and see greater possibilities and potential of that. Definitely. How about you? What would you like to see the world? What could you bring into the future of this world?
Well, I do have a dream. I have a dream to connect more people to their higher selves, and I'm going to be out leading courses to help people really find their higher selves, and so that's a piece of it. But the big dream for me is when I spoke about this legend of Merlin and Arthur that I learned from Lazarus. It was channeled, but it was a version of the story. It had none of this Lancelot in there and all this infidelity. It was nothing about that. It was about the personal growth of one my relationship with me, growing each of these qualities of chivalry, I can see that I'm going to have wonderful parties, wonderful, let's say, trainings in castles in Europe or up in the wine country, where I am teaching people how to connect with Merlin inside of them and Arthur, and know about the knights and the ladies of the round. I want to bring this legend. It matters a great deal to me. It feels like it's a real homecoming to work with this legend and to share it with others. So I can see myself doing workshops where I'm excited to do that, to teach people about chivalry.
So it's the highest potential of oneself, living in the nobleness of oneself.
And the highest character. And, I feel a lot for men and women, absolutely. But I can see how men want to, just as an example, that they want to grow better themselves, let's say. And so they can do that through sports. They can do it through business. They don't get to a certain level of accomplishment on a let's say, a corporate ladder or whatever. But when you're focused on chivalry, you're always able to keep growing and finding new adventures and new ways of becoming. It's really thrilling. Right. So that's what
chivalry has got nothing to do with what's outside of you. It's got nothing. It's not dependent, related on anything out of you. It's within you.
Yes.
It's tapping into the highest goodness of you.
Yeah. It's actually to have a relationship with yourself where you're growing these qualities within yourself, starting with being honest with yourself and questioning your own assumptions and being loyal to yourself. And it moves to the vision of something bigger than you, and moving on to virtue, to have the virtue, to the connection to self that is integrated. And from virtue, it moves into grace, what comes naturally as you receive your gifts that you do naturally. Onto truth, I'm saying all the nights at this point, onto truth, courage to live your life, nobody else's life. And from that, with courage to be courteous, knight of courtesy, is to be nice and kind, to be a good friend. And then there's the gallant knight that will take you into the places other people cannot go. That's my knight, the gallant knight, gallantry. And then into authority. I know that I'm authoring this life. And then into service, and finally humility. Humility isn't aw shucks. Humility is more of, I'm standing here in the present in not knowing, and open to what it could be, possibility, without, expecting the best. Anyway, those are some of the 12 nights, but yes.
There are those that judge other people for not being what they see that is the best that they would want from relationships or for themselves. So they're in those relationships, and the dynamics of that relationship is that they start to judge other people. Mm-hmm. So therefore they do a lot of separation from other people. Mm-hmm. It's them and the way they see it, and they're setting themselves up as the judge and the jury of it. And those other people aren't measuring up. So there's a credible amount of separation going on. Let's speak about that.
Yes.
It's the fact of one against others, instead of it's all of us together, and we're all in a unity of it, and we're in that oneness, we're working things out together, and each is a catalyst for each other. Mm-hmm. How would you reckon all of this in your...
Well, when people will come to me, say, for example, with relationship issues in my coaching, I would first let them feel their feelings, because we don't want to keep repressing. Judgment usually is, a judgment will freeze emotion. May as well just eat Haagen-Dazs, of course, more calories. But when we judge, like if I were to have a judgment about you, for example, that all of a sudden would block my perception and possibility of the more of you. So I think we judge when we judge. We can judge something, but we're trying to distance ourselves, quite physically separate ourselves from something. But after the emotions are out, okay, I'm angry at my husband for doing this, or my wife for always doing that, then the next step would be to slow it down and start to see what part of that is me. Think of it as a mirror. What am I actually judging here? Most often, we're judging something that is really a reflection of ourselves. And so when we can get in touch with that, my wife is always talking too much and she's never letting anybody get a word in edgewise. Well, what part of me is doing that? What part of me is being just like that? And I can see that part, recognize it, acknowledge it, feel it and forgive it. And then once that happens, all of a sudden, my wife doesn't seem to be doing that as much anymore. It can change miraculously. So I would say, yes, we're here to all get along and get along well. But it all begins with self. All change happens with me. Nothing will change in my life until I change. And my perception now of that other relationship will change. I won't have to be judgmental. Yeah, that's how I see it.
I'm very curious in how you made the leap from being in Princeton graduate and being in the mental part of your mind and the analytical part of logic to this totally opposite of that. How did you make the leap to that? In fact, in the very beginning, when you came across being a medical intuitive and the California energy and the meditation and everything we were speaking about, was there a resistance of it? Because your Princeton side of you said, no, this can't be.
It's an interesting question, Victoria, because no, there's never been resistance. If anything, Princeton, and even going to Princeton, I think I was very fortunate. My interview with the fellow who, I'll never forget him, Spencer Reynolds. I think because I was always undeniably myself. I'd always bring my art or my music or my love of God or spirituality or Jesus or Disney, whatever it was. I was on fire all the time. So it never occurred to me. I'm very blessed and I've worked hard with my intellect. But I've never separated that out. Why would I? When the emotions and the creativity and the passion and the unknown, it seemed that it was a whole package. And I think the package came with me through my whole life, through grade school, through Princeton and on. It never seemed to stop. I didn't go, I'm an intellect, I don't think I can go into that field. But I would say...
but do you see how that could be, where probably a lot of your fellow students...
Oh, yeah.
They have a total rejection of it.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And they say that does not exist, and they don't want to know anything about it. Where it seems to be that you did it very beautifully and gracefully, and you acknowledged both sides of your brain, the right part and the left part.
Well, thank you for saying it. It hasn't been a smooth ride all the time. Sometimes it's been, I can throw myself on the couch crying like anybody else. But I would say there is a purpose for my being here, and the closest I can get is to connect people to the more of who they are. That's one of the things I loved about becoming a coach, and I agree. Here I'm a composer for Jim Henson, and I'm creating a book and illustrating it for Knopf, and an illustrator for Disney. I've jumped all over the place. I've always followed my heart. But I guess I would say that when I started to learn coaching and I saw it's really the business of being a mirror to show you how beautiful you are. I'm here to be a mirror, to mirror back to you. So, for example, a beautiful aspect of coaching is acknowledgement. So if I look at you and I would say, you have such a beautiful soul, you have an aspect of such a nobility and a wisdom from years and years of just being you. You have a deep heart and a sweetness. And these are things that are true about you. And I can see them. I can be a mirror and acknowledge that in you. We never get enough acknowledgement. But I could also say, hey, over here, maybe you're fooling yourself. Maybe that's a lie. Maybe this is the direction you want to go. That's what coaching is about, is drawing out the bigger, the more beautiful in a person, and being there to hold and help a person through the tough
and support all
yeah,
that.
Absolutely, yeah.
What would you like to say to others that would like to hear at this moment in time of where they are at right now, and they would like to live more of a fuller life, and they're listening to us, and what would be the one gift that you could give people that they perhaps can incorporate into their life that would help them greatly?
I really want to think about that. That's such a profound thing to think. I think I would say this, and I am tapping a little bit more into my intuition for a moment. I would say, those smaller voices inside of you that have always been there, that are telling you to go this way or that you've stuffed down or stopped or tried to deny, they quietly come back. The louder voices are always there. The voices telling you to do this, go there, whatever. But I would say trust those smaller voices in you. And I would also say it is time for a new beginning and a second chance. Life is not over. It's completely fine for you to put down what you're doing that is not working and to go ahead with that dream that you really want to do and pursue it now. There's plenty of time. That's what I would say, because we so often, in fact, I'll give you a bit of homework on that. I could say the homework I give to others is to make a list of all the things you love to do, make a list of all the causes or the things you care about in the world, and somewhere between those two, you can start to be on the purpose that you were here for.
So what I'm hearing you say also to the others is that it's okay to make changes. You've been living your life to this one way, in this certain vein of patterns and familiarity, and it's okay now to make perhaps radical changes.
Yes, radical.
And these changes will be listening to those soft whispers that and your passion, and explore it. See that even it's possible to go there. Entertain that thought.
Absolutely. And radical can be not just what you get to do or have to do, it can be also radical of what you don't have to do anymore. Maybe it is really putting down a toxic relationship. Maybe it isn't always calling mom on a Sunday because the relationship is too painful. Maybe it's something you don't have to do. So what can be radical looking, it isn't about bigger is better. It can sometimes mean, I think I'm going to stop watching this television show, or I am going to pick up my painting again, or it could be just as simple as I'm going to tell myself the truth more. So change anywhere is good, but there is more time, and that's part of the new world we're moving into, that time is going to be more expanded, even though it feels very like it's speeding up quite a bit. But let yourself have that new beginning and second chance.
How long does it take for a person to, when they start to work with you as a coach and as an intuitive, to get the results that they would want, and they no longer need to work with you? Is there? I mean, I know it can be vary from person to person, but is there a general?
I'd like to say it's general, but I have such different. I would say this: people come for 1 hour reading because they want to hear what their higher self has to say, and they want to get right to the root of a problem. So I will see a person for 1 hour, and they might come back 6 months later or not. Or then people say, wow, this is quite a pattern, and I want to be free of this pattern. So usually they'll hire me for about maybe 4 to 6 months, and we'll rewire that part of the physiology, the neural biology, the emotional, the mental, all of that will both get rewired. So I'd say about 4 months or 6 months when they want to do that. And then I have some clients that just are so fascinated by their spiritual growth and learning through me that they just keep hiring me year after year. It's expensive. And so that's why I'm trying to do more group coaching now, because my one-on-one fee can really add up for that. So I guess that's what I would say. And usually, or remember, one person said, I want this, 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 and this, stop smoking, lose 30 pounds, find the love of my life, and turn my home into a B&B. And she did all of that with me in, I think, 5 months. And then she said, no, I'm done. And she was done. So each person is different.
Well, let's talk about a specific, without giving a name of a certain client. Give me an example of one of their most favorite success stories of one of your clients.
Wow. Oh, there's so many. What are my favorites? Well, I am trying to think because I do have several. I guess I would think maybe, well, that one shocked me that she got through all of those things in 5 months. But I'd say one of my clients who, she was working in a bank, not a bank, she's a financial company, with investments in the city. And when she came to me, she was going out for martinis every night with the girls. She was just much more involved in the office politics, but she had an inkling for her spirituality, so to speak. And she had a boyfriend that was pretty much leaning on her and sucking her dry. And so
sucking her dry?
Yeah.
In what way?
He was living off of her, not only living in her apartment, but was not contributing financially, and then making demands on her and that kind of thing. And so I would say in the first phase, what we were doing was helping her to come back home to herself and to be listening to her own judgment so that she could really see what was going on. And in the long run, what happened, she started growing in the company, started doing more things, more as an executive there, became more of a speaker, getting out on stage to talk about it, and set down a whole number of things that were really more coming from her adolescent and not her adult. And I call her a tremendous success. She's very happy and very successful.
Did she change your relationship, or?
Oh, that one was over pretty soon. So she could see the light on that, and then with me she did find the love of her life, and she's been with him now maybe 5 years. And she's still coaching with me.
What would be the perfect love of her life? Example of that?
The perfect love of her life,
or the love of her life now.
Well, he is just they're very compatible. They love each other. They're happy. I think they feel like life is an adventure together.
And they have a lot of communication.
And there's always more love. I mean, she's reaching into her spirituality, and she loves her Buddhism and her fire dancing, or fire spinning. And I'm fascinated by people who are living with one foot in each world. And
so she has one foot in the corporate, but she's embracing the other world of this totally different world of the corporate world.
Oh, yeah. Well, we all have, those of us that are waking up right now, that calling is so exciting. We can't help but follow it. So it's a passion. It keeps getting more and more and more and more love to find. Yeah.
And what would be the ideal example of living your higher self, as you mentioned that's your calling to inspire people to be?
What would be what?
Well, you mentioned the Knights of the Round Table and all of the higher noble aspects. We understand that. But is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
That's sweet of you to ask. I'm just growing more and more deeply in love with my own higher self. So for me, that looks like, and I'm slightly sidestepping, but I'll come back to what you're saying, sitting in the morning early in an inner sanctuary. Mine happens to have a fireplace, and it's all very cozy, and it's in an enchanted forest, a little cottage, and my higher self will come and sit with me, and just being in her presence, feeling the love. Sometimes I can see her physically. Most often it's just a feeling that I am so loved and so held and so cherished. Get so filled with the love and the gratitude, I think, that I'm so loved, and knowing I'm so loved and feeling my love for her. I just get all plump and happy, so that whatever the day is it's fine, whatever happens, because I've already had my love bath, and now I can bring that love into the world. So I would say it's more of helping people to know they don't have to look for love outside of them. They can get more than enough inside, and then they start attracting the love they want.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And on that note, I'd like to say thank you very, very much for sharing all of your wisdom and all of your beauty.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And from the Art of Conscious Living TV, please do take care of yourselves and do take care of others.